Operation Torch. Lieutenant Colonel Roth had long ago accepted that his war would rarely be seen, let alone remembered. His battlefield wasn't measured in miles of territory gained or enemy tanks destroyed. His victories came on onion skin sheets of intercepted radio traffic, in the faint clicks of wireless operators somewhere in the Mediterranean night. In early November 1942, aboard a U.S. transport ship streaming towards North Africa, Roth sat in his cramped signals cabin. A hurricane lamp swaying overhead. Before him lay a French naval cipher, the ink still smudged from its hasty transcription. Every Allied soldier in the convoy, the thousands packed into bunks, smoking on deck, riding home before the storm, depended on what he could pry from those columns of numbers and letters. He was 43, lean and serious, with a face worn thin by years of staring into puzzles most men could not even see. Once, he had been a young officer in France during the last war, charging across mud-choked fields with nothing but a rifle. Now, 2 decades later, his weapon was silence. 3 nights before the landings, Roth and his team caught a French burst transmission out of Casablanca. It was encrypted in a system the Allies had only partially broken. Roth hunched over the intercepts, chasing patterns like a hunter tracking footprints in the dust. At last, the pieces fell into place. He slammed his pencil down. "They're shifting destroyers into patrol lanes," he told the Navy liaison. "If they hold those lines, they'll spot our convoys before dawn. We'll lose the element of surprise." The messages shot up the chain of command. Within hours, the invasion fleet's course was subtly altered, slipping through a gap in the French net. To most of the officers aboard, it was a minor adjustment on the map. To Roth, it was the difference between Operation Torch landing with confusion or being torn apart before it even reached the beaches. Roth's other weapon was misdirection. For weeks before the operation, he had worked with British intelligence to flood the airwaves with phantom traffic. Fake radio operators mimicked entire divisions, transmitting chatter that had suggested Allied landings in Dakar, or even southern France. These carefully crafted, unguarded messages hinted at false timetables, luring Vichy commanders into believing the real assault was days away. One night, just after midnight, Roth personally keyed out a transmission in fluent French naval code. It was designed to sound like an officer reporting phantom supply shortages in Algiers. He leaned back as the last pulse of Morse faded. If the decryption worked, Vichy commanders would waste precious hours repositioning troops hundreds of miles from where the hammer would actually fall. Deception was a cruel art. He was tricking men who might otherwise have stayed in their barracks into marching out into an empty desert, hungry and uncertain. Yet war had offered no gentle paths. If confusion spared Allied soldiers on the beaches, then confusion was mercy. On the morning of November 8, 1942, Roth stood on the bridge as the first wave of landing craft pushed through the surf at Vadala. The horizon lit with fire, naval guns pounding the shore, French artillery answering, tracer rounds sweeping the water. From the distance, the men charging into the waves looked like toy soldiers. But Roth knew better. Each figure was flesh and blood. Praying the codes had been right, the deception had held, and that the French defenses were not waiting in full force. By midday, white flags began appearing along the bunkers. Many Vichy units had surrendered rather than fire on Americans. Some even saluted as they handed over their rifles. The deception, the code breaking, the gamble. It had worked. Casablanca was within reach. That night, the port burned in the distance. Roth sat alone at his desk, filling his notebook with decoded intercepts, marking successes and noting gaps. He could still hear the surf in his mind, the chaos of the landing, the cries of the men caught in the water. His aide, a young captain, stepped in, hesitantly. "Sir, the generals say your work saved thousands today." Roth looked up, weary-eyed. "The men saved themselves. We just moved the pieces." He closed the notebook. "But remember this, Captain. Every cipher we break, every false signal we send, it's not just ink on paper. It decides who lives and who doesn't." The captain nodded, though he couldn't quite understand. He hadn't spent nights alone with enemy messages, hearing the desperation in coded fragments. He hadn't felt the weight of secrets like Roth had. As the ship's engine rumbled and the smoke of battle drifted inland, Lieutenant Colonel Roth returned to his papers. Torch was won, but the war stretched ahead. Tunisia, Sicily, Normandy, Berlin. There would be more codes, more shadows. And he would fight them all, unseen, uncelebrated, but essential. This story is inspired by true historical events surrounding Operation Torch in 1942. While the military operations and its context are factual, some characters, dialogues, and specific actions are dramatized for narrative purposes. Any resemblance to real persons? This story is intended for historical fiction and not as a definitive historical account. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.